Jill, let's go back to you. You have the Hunger Project is its objective is to empower men and women to meet their own goals, and from a very grassroots level to really take control of their own destiny. And I think you've said that the human rights framework is important to that work. Perhaps it's a way to say it, it's necessary but not sufficient. It only gets you so far. What else do you need? Picking up on Cynthia's, you got to think small to think big. The work you do is very local, very micro. What are the big ideas that you draw from that?
Okay. Thank you very much. And just before I answer that, I just wanted to, if you don't mind, spend 30 seconds. There is another agenda that is time-bound and the clock is ticking. And I think we really have to relate that agenda to what we're talking about today, which is what I'm talking about is the Millennium Development Goals. So we have 8 Millennium Development Goals, and the world has said that they're going to achieve them by 2015. We're in the second half and counting down, and unfortunately, there have been things that were looking okay for at least some of them, leaving aside things, maternal mortality, but even the fundamental one of hunger is now starting to look very critical, given last year's crisis, given what's happening now with the global financial crisis, given energy prices last year, the whole range of other things that have blown us off course. So I just wanted to make sure that we keep that agenda in mind as well. Just in terms of the specific question and what more we need to add to what the Hunger Project does, and we do of course work from a very basic viewpoint of fundamental human rights. What we are all about is human dignity, respecting human dignity, providing people with opportunities to really meet their capacities and their capabilities. But we do, and in some instances we actually do take quite a rights-based approach. So for example, in India, we work in training the women that have been elected to the local councils, the panchayats, but unfortunately without being given any training whatsoever, and are sadly in danger and have been just the victims of becoming somebody's puppet. And what we work, and we've trained more than 80,000 such women to actually use their positions on the panchayats to improve the livelihoods of their communities. And we have some data that we're very excited about that is showing that the women are actually using those in very positive ways, much more so often than the male-led panchayats. But at root, we believe that we've got to change mindsets, that if you change mindsets and behaviours, then you actually do start to achieve what we're talking about when we're talking about fundamental human rights. So let's just take gender equality. We see that as a goal as well as an object in its own right, so that we have I talked already about committees must be made up of 50% women, because we believe that women are absolutely central to the development process. We have to change mindsets to achieve that, both men's mindsets and women's mindsets. And unless we do that, we don't, just focusing on the rights themselves, we don't believe leads to any tangible or concrete change, nor does it lead to sustainable change, which is what we believe is really important. Now, we do link those mindset changes, that mobilisation we're undertaking, to that whole focus on human dignity, human choice, opportunity. But we also recognise that and again part of our exit strategy, is to link the communities with which we work to the local government, because too often development approaches come in from the spaceship and land and then leave. And when they do leave, often the development that is left behind might stagger for a little while and then fade away. We believe that unless you link the people to the actual local government, and they have a right to access many of the services. We work in countries where there is at least some commitment to decentralisation of services away from the urban areas to get to the rural people. So we partner with the local authorities and government to ensure that people can access the things to which they have a right, but perhaps even more importantly for the long term, their voice begins to be heard and considered by the local government authorities and then ultimately the national governments to ensure that that really truly leads to further decentralisation. Just an example, what am I talking about? We are a very resource-poor organisation. We don't pay, for example, for the nurse in the clinic that the people have built with our assistance. We don't pay for the teacher, we don't pay for the agricultural extension worker to come and help the women food farmers, and remembering that it is women that feed the continent of Africa, the households of Africa. 80% of the food consumed in rural households is grown by women. But we don't pay for those services. We believe that it's best to make sure that people going through our mobilisation process then feel truly part of the country, their country's own infrastructure. And so that when we leave, and we have left at least 20 of those communities where they have the rural banks I talked about, I can show you data where where the community continues to progress, where indeed those that have received training in that VCA I was talking about have gone on to become elected officials themselves. And of course their key objective and motivation is to try to bring to a wider population what they have experienced themselves.
Jill, just a very quick follow-up question. When you're talking about connecting these local projects to local government, you said you really talk to them about the right that these people have to resources. But what right? Is it a legalistic argument based on what the local laws are, or is it more of an international framework that you're using?
Within we call these epicenters. We use the international framework, but we also use, obviously, we tailor each of our particular programs to what is going on in the local area. So, for example, in India, there is a right for employment generation schemes to ensure that very poor rural people get so many days of work a year working on a rural schemes funded by the state. So that's a legal right we're accessing. Or, for example, there are agricultural extension workers, and the women, because they are farmers, really have a right to that. But, you know, old customs, old traditions and assumptions die hard, and so most of the agricultural extension workers' work is done with the male food farmers because they grow cash crops, and that's the way it's been done. So it's a combination of what's there and what isn't. Sometimes, actually, it's a matter of working against what is there. So, for example, in India, I talked about 1/3 of all seats are reserved in these local panchayats for women, elected women representatives. A law was passed in 2006 saying that elected representatives, a federal law is to be enacted by various states, and some states have taken it up and some haven't, that if people have 2 children, they shouldn't be elected, that they should not hold official positions. Now, the only people we're aware of that have actually ever had that law used against them are women. And working in conjunction with, and we're going to talk about partnerships later, I think, but working in conjunction with a whole range of partners, we've been able to reverse that and have that law removed from some state legislatures.